Front is a tech company that has recently raised $65 million at a $1.7 billion valuation. The company is making around $5 million in monthly recurring revenue, which brings them to a total of around $60 million in ARR, annual recurring revenue. They're a customer communication hub integrating a bunch of channels like emails, shared inboxes, automations, SMS, and so on. And you can use them for customer support, sales, or whatever type of communication that your company needs to deal with. It was founded in 2013 by Mathilde Collin. She's a French woman, and she's absolutely incredible, an incredible CEO. Personally, one of my favorite CEOs in the world. And today we're gonna dive deeper into their story. So how did Front go from zero to a staggering $1.7 billion in valuation? So to explain that, I'll break this video down into three categories, three parts: growth, product, and marketing. So let's talk about growth first and how they came to be a company and how, the early days of Front. So Mathilde Collin, which is the founder and CEO, basically was attending sort of startup events, and that's why I tell everyone, go to startup events, mingle, hang out with people in the space. Even if you're not a startup, but if you want to build a startup, a tech company, hang around those people, go to those events. That's, chances are you can meet your co-founder there. You never know. So anyway, she was attending one of these events, and she already had in the back of her mind that she wanted to create a company. In fact, as soon as she graduated and went straight to work for a company, a startup, early stage startup launching products. So that was kind of the beginning of her career. And with already in the back of her mind, I want to build a company. I want to have a tech company. She just didn't know anything about it. So obviously working for a startup was a good move, I would say, because she kind of learned the inside out and like how things work. So anyway, she did that. She was attending those meetings, and she found this guy that was a technical person, a software engineer, and they kind of came together in this idea of having this sort of email client at the time, new email client, but built for companies. And the interesting part here is, this technical co-founder became her CTO and later became her husband. And that's important. The reason why I bring this up is because, when we talk about finding co-founders, which is quite difficult, because it's not just about meeting someone that is complementary to your skills, but also finding someone that shares the same values and the same sort of worldview in a way. You can have some differences, obviously, but you need to agree on the main things, otherwise it won't work. And so I think it was really important. It's really important to, when telling that story, to mention that the CTO later became her husband, which means it goes to show how much they align. And obviously having someone, as a CEO, as a business person, that won't give up, because giving up can also kind of impact you on the other end, the other partner. And for the CTO, they're having someone as a CTO, someone that is technical, that won't give up, because there's the other end, the partner that is sort of counting on them. That is extremely important. I see a lot of people, a lot of companies kind of giving up on the early days. Maybe they build some kind, especially software engineers, they build a first version, but then they kind of fall out of love with the product, I would say, just because people aren't using it as much as they expected. But regardless, I think when you have a clear vision, you can really build over time and get as closest to that vision as you can. And most of the times, I think founders don't get to do that, either because they don't have the technical skills, or if they do have the technical skills, they don't insist on the product enough, so the product would have some kind of success. And Front is kind of an example of that. They really started out as a very lean version. In fact, Mathilde, in one of her interviews, she mentions the fact that early on, nobody would a lot of people would try the product, but nobody would actually use the product and go from the trial to the premium version, to purchasing the products and paying the monthly fee. The reason for that is because the product was just not mature enough. It was just not robust enough. It didn't have all the features that a company would expect. We'll talk about that in a minute. But so anyway, they started this company, and they sort of entered beta phase. And again, Mathilde Collin is French, so they were in France at that point, in Paris, and they started in a beta phase, kind of this very early stage, very early version of the product. And here's how things change quickly. She applied for Y Combinator, which I have talked about Y Combinator a few times in my videos. It is an accelerator that I respect a lot. A lot of my friends have been through the acceleration program. I myself have not, but I know how efficient and how great the program is for founders. It really is very, very impactful. And to be honest, if I don't think, and I can be wrong about that, but I don't think Front would have had the success it has, or it had, if they hadn't been through the Y Combinator program. It's just my opinion. Obviously, some people might disagree. Mathilde Collin might disagree and say, no, we would have been as successful if even if we hadn't joined Y Combinator. But the reason why I say that is because, especially for first-time founders, and she was a first-time founder, it's very hard to navigate just the startup scenario, the startup world. If you don't have enough finances to do whatever you have to do, then things get really complicated. And so let's continue with the story. I'll talk about that in a minute. So they started in France, in Paris. I think they raised some capital. Honestly, I couldn't find how much they raised in France. I have no idea. It might have been $200, $200,000. It might have been $300K. I really don't know. But they raised some capital in France, some pre-seed round, something like that, and then joined Y Combinator for the I think it was the winter batch in 2014. I might be wrong here, but I think anyway it was in 2014. And they joined the batch, and they had signups. They had, they were building the product faster now because they got some money from Y Combinator, and so they could finally kind of build a little bit more of the product. Anyway, they were moving faster. They had 3,000 signups, and they were converting some of those signups into clients. And they, I think by the end of the program, which lasts for 3 months. It's a 3-month kind of acceleration program. They had around $5,000 in recurring revenue, so 5K MRR. But I do believe Y Combinator changed everything, because first of all, you have the support of Silicon Valley. In fact, at that time, she moved some of the people that were working on the products. Well, in this case, her and her husband. And I don't remember exactly if there was anyone else in the team that went to California. Maybe there was, but he hired a bunch of people at that time. Went through the program, had a lot of eyes in their products, because it was kind of a simpler version of what it is now. And this is important. We're going to talk about that. But at the end of Y Combinator, they raised $3.1 million in a seed round. And that's quite important if you think of the arc, the journey that they had been through so far. To raise $3.1 million is not, especially in 2014, things changed. Today, nowadays, is easier to raise a larger seed round, but at the time it was a great seed round. So again, just going back to the Y Combinator, element here, I do think it was the single biggest, kind of, acceleration program that factor in their success, at least in their early day success, for many reasons. Paris is, France just in general doesn't compare, not really. It has grown a lot. If you're a French person, you live in Paris and you're watching this video, I want you to understand that I acknowledge how fast Paris has progressed in that sense. I've been through a lot of, I've talked to a lot of founders in Paris. I've been to Paris in events, in startup events. I know the La French Tech and a bunch of other programs that France has. So it's not to say that France hasn't evolved and it's great for startups. I'm just saying that Silicon Valley is more of it. Is still, to this day, just a better ecosystem in general. So anyway, being accepted at Y Combinator meant that they were now at the heart of innovation, at the heart of that environment that fosters innovation really strongly. And they had a lot of eyeballs. If you go through Y Combinator, I recommend anyone that is starting a company to apply for Y Combinator, honestly, because I think it changes a lot the trajectory of a company. So a lot of eyeballs, investors that are looking at what you do, you're kind of in the center stage of the world in terms of startups and new technology. There is an abundance of money. That is not to, you can't dismiss the fact that Silicon Valley, America in general, but Silicon Valley specifically, has a lot of money from investors. Comparing to Paris, comparing to Brazil, comparing to most countries in Europe, London is really good, but I think it still doesn't compare. Silicon Valley just has, again, more of it. And Mathilde Collin actually talks about that as well. Mathilde says in one of her interviews, she says that some people describe kind of like Europe sometimes as being the process of raising capital there is is the equivalent of begging for money in a subway car, a crowded subway car. I think it's something along those lines. Anyway, they went through the program successfully, signed up companies, and were making 5K in MR, monthly recurring revenue, and then raised $3.1 million and consistently grew the company $5,000 each month after that for the next 12 months. They were consistently growing 5K every single month in monthly recurring revenue, which goes to show the consistency also of the delivery of the product and the capabilities they were delivering to companies. So they continued growing after the end of the batch and after raising $3.1 million, continued growing 5K a month until 12 months later, if I'm not mistaken, they raised a Series A round, a $10 million Series A round, which was, it was a good round for a Series A round at the time, and continued growing sort of exponentially after that. The company has raised to date over $200 million. Let's talk about the product now. Shared inboxes were the perfect start for them. It's low commitment, it has low expectations from companies, and it's pretty much a perfect MVP it was the perfect MVP for them. And there are two main things that go into this kind of concept. First of all, most companies might not need a lot of feature. Sometimes companies startups trying to focus on delivering a lot of features, and the reality is maybe most companies don't need that many features. I mean, if you research your market, you will know, but in most cases, most companies will need some core features, and then you have the nice to have things, and then you have the necessities, the must have things. And they were building the must have things. Like shared inboxes was really a painful. It was a pain point that companies were seeing. Like, oh, we're not allowed. If you have a Gmail account, or so, at least at the time, you wouldn't be able to have a shared inbox. And for France, that was the perfect start. Okay, you can have an inbox, which can be, maybe support at whatever domain, whatever company. And then instead of having one person receiving all that email or multiple people trying to access the same account, you would just have a shared inboxes that multiple people could access, and you have different rules, the automations, and all of that you could use. So two main things here. First of all, again, most companies might not need a lot of features, so that's a good start. But also, when you have a simple product, you can have like a really simple lean product that does one thing or two things most. Your message can be clearer, and that is an important thing, because if you're trying to convey the message like this is what we do, and you do a lot of things, then your message can get scattered and basically just not understood, just because you do so much that you have to explain, and it becomes complex. So again, having being very lean and having a core functionality really makes it much simpler to convey the message. This is what we do for this type of company or this type of person, for this much. That's it. If you have a very clear, and for some reason I'm thinking here of Slack, at least in the beginning, Slack was really simple. Like, this is what we do. We're a communication channel for companies. That's it. You just message each other. You have channels that you can collaborate on, but other than that, it's just a chat, really, for internal chat. So, when you have an idea, something that you want to do, as a startup founder, try not to grow the vision too much. You can do that later. For them, and Mathilde says that, like, the thing that Front became was not necessarily the thing that Front was created for. And that happens with most companies. Most companies start with a very clear vision, with a very simple thing that they want to solve, and then they grow that to different scenarios and different applicabilities. But in the beginning, it's really good to have that really lean and simple version. So speaking about the product, I mentioned that they had the beta version, the beta version for quite a while. The total was 7 months. So they stayed 7 months in beta, and then release it to the public, and kind of launch it publicly when they had already 3,000 customers, which is a good validation, I would say. But I just wanted to talk about that part in this section of the product, the beta phase in terms of product, because it's really important for a startup to go through that phase. Some startups want to release the product early on, like to everyone, and kind of scale from there. And I think that's a mistake most of the time. That you can be lucky, you can get lucky, but most of the times you need that phase. That phase is incredibly important if you're launching a product, because you get to see how users are interacting with your product, in what kinds of ways are they using. You have interviews with your customers, you talk to your customers, you just learn so much. You're doing the things that don't scale, because later, obviously, you're not going to interview everyone, you're not going to onboard everyone. But when you're launching your product, you go through that beta phase, you get the opportunity to really onboard. If you're the founder, onboarding the company, making sure that they understand the product, asking, do you understand what the product does? How will you use the product? Did you know that the product can do that, that, and that? And maybe some of the aspects of the products are not understood by your client or your potential client, and you get to explain that in real time, and then adjust your message in in whatever landing page you have created, whatever presentation you have created, and even fine-tune things for the investors as well. It could be. I normally say that the message for investors and the message for clients are vastly different. I think that's true for most companies, but in this case, there's some applicabilities here. You can actually learn things from a client, and later on you can talk to your customer. Oh, by the way, this is how my clients see me, as this, that, and that. So anyway, this phase is incredibly important. And she mentions in some videos, in some interviews, that she was wearing a lot of hats. So she was doing all that, and you get to kind of learn how to wear all these hats and then pass on the information to whoever person you hire to do that job specifically. An example would be sales. Sales is probably one of the most easy examples to give here. If you are trying to sell your products, then you should probably sell it yourself rather than hiring some salesperson. It's possible maybe you can find someone that is going to sell it immediately super well, because I don't know, because that person has worked in a similar product in the past and used to sell that product. But most of the times, you as a founder will learn how to sell the product to customers, convert trials, convert people that are potential customers into actual customers, paying customers, and then you will kind of hire and pass on that information to whoever is the new sales rep that you have. And while I'm at it, I would say that hiring two sales rep at the same time, if you can, is the best move, because then you can compare kind of one to the other instead of trying one. And I think Mathilde went through that cycle. She hired a few people without actually doing that, and then it turned out that person wouldn't really be a fit and wouldn't know how to do that. And so again, here's my advice. I think you should do that yourself as a founder, and then hire someone that can do that better than you, but with the information that you are providing them. This is how I've been doing. Maybe you can fine tune things, but this is how I've been doing so far. And hopefully that person will take that advice, will understand how you were doing that, and we'll fine tune that process and experiment with different methodologies, but having that kind of backbone, having that kind of principle in mind. And that can be the case for a customer success agent, sales rep, HR, hiring people, many hats that you can wear first as a founder, and later hire someone that is going to do that better than you did. One of the great things about their product is that you can actually what we call lend and expand. It's interesting because, and I see some companies that have that, and it's great for business, because once you have a few people in the company using your product in that specific client that you're trying to sell to, they use that and they have a good experience with your product. It is great to see how they can influence others to use that product as well, and then of course you expand that inside the company, and you can either leave it to them to influence each other and kind of grow from there, or you can help them out, obviously having those maybe monthly calls and helping them convince others in their organization to adopt the product. And so this is called the land and expand strategy, and it works really well. And Mathilde Collin kind of knew that from early on. And I think one of the things that I saw in one of the pitch decks, I think it was their seed round pitch deck, is that they mentioned that, and they show how that impacted net MRR, net monthly recurring revenue. Because think of it, imagine that you acquire 100 companies, and maybe you have some good churn, a lot of churn, or not a lot of churn. In her case, they almost didn't have any churn, which is great. It's fantastic. But not only that, the companies that are still using your product start spending more money with your product, because now more people are using the product inside the organization. So one account becomes more, just like a bigger account over time, which means that you start having a negative, basically a negative sort of a negative net MRR, a net MRR churn, because despite the fact that some companies are leaving your product and not using it anymore, the ones that are staying are spending more money with it. So that's a really fascinating thing. And to be honest, I think as an investor, if you were to look at a company, this would probably be the most impressive metrics one of the most impressive metrics that they have. Net MMR churn is negative, and net MMR churn is really the holy grail that a startup can be looking to achieve. And they were working with really cool companies. It's not every product that it creates, not every technology can be used by the cool companies, if you know what I mean. And it's a very personal, obviously, viewpoint here, but to me, the cool companies that I'm referring to are like startups that are big now. So imagine, for example, Shopify, Lyft, Dropbox. The companies that were once startups and are still kind of cool. You have this kind of, and they still have this startup-y vibe in a way. Anyway, this will be, instead of being the SP 500 or 100 or whatever, they are less of established companies, kind of established companies. But anyway, you get my point. Like, they're tech companies, so they're cooler in a way. So they were working with these cool companies, and that drove a lot of I shouldn't say it drove a lot of traffic, but it draws a lot of attention if you're working with those cool companies, because you can showcase, oh, by the way, this company here, which is modern, cool, new, innovative, is using my product. So why wouldn't you? And if you're a company and you're looking at the clients and you see some clients that you think are cool too, you're like, okay, that's cool. I'm gonna maybe adopt the products as well. I think that influences how companies adopt your products or not, who is using your products. Let's talk about marketing now. And the best place to start is with Mathilde herself. She is a powerhouse. She really drove the growth of the product initially, I think, by the way that she deals with content. So there's a mix here of content and PR. Mathilde was at the forefront of it, writing content about customer success, how email clients could be used, and then her experiences as a founder as well. So I think that, and she acknowledges that in many blog posts and interviews, this was probably one of the main, if not probably the main factor of growth. The content strategy really drove a lot of traction early on and down the road as well, obviously, because then you talk about SEO and as you get more relevant in Google searches, you obviously have more eyeballs, which are now converting to paying customers. So I would have to say that Mathilde herself was the main element in their marketing strategy, at least in the early days. And then there's word of mouth as well. Marketing is usually, in the early stages, also word of mouth. People talking about your product. If you're lucky, if you build something that is necessary enough, that is cool enough, then people start talking about it and recommending that to one another. So that was great too. But the content, going back to the content, even if it's after the Mathilde Collin period, when she kind of was not writing as often as she was before, Front's content was mainly revolving around a range of topics, from customer success to sales and internal communications, and all things communication that a company can have. They were creating a lot of content still are creating a lot of content for that. If you go to their website, if you go to their blog, in resources, and you go to their blog, you can see that they write a lot of content. So I think Mathilde kind of stuck to her strategy of creating a lot of content, but obviously now she has more people working at the company and an entire team for communication and including the blog. So while we're talking about marketing, I wanted to talk about the last component for marketing here, at least in their story, for in their case, which is paid advertising. You have to talk about it because after a while, and in the case of Front, it wasn't different. The first marketing hire was 3 years down the road. So that is huge, especially for a company that is raising capital. If you're not raising capital, that is more, I think, it's more understandable But if you have raised capital, and at this point I think they had raised probably $20 million or maybe $15 million, something like that. That is a lot of money to not play around with paid advertising. And the first the first marketing hire was 3 years down the road, and Mathilde tried bringing in people to figure out what to do, right? Basically, like a marketing person figure out what we need to do, and that didn't work. It didn't work well for them. So what they did is to hire very specific roles, very specific people in very specific areas. Notably, a partner, a partner manager. So that was like a partner marketing manager. That was the single biggest thing in that period of time where they were playing with paid advertising that changed things, radically. And they were starting to targeting basically companies and organizations that were already using products that they integrate with. So it would be easier, sort of, to those low-hanging fruits. It would be easier to convince them to use the product because they were already using maybe Salesforce, maybe some other products that could integrate with Front. So that was their initial experience with paid advertising, and apparently it worked really, really well. And obviously, I would expect that after that, 5 years, 6 years down the road, they really started deploying a lot more capital into paid advertising. Although I would argue that they were doing that less than their peers, less than companies at that stage. Typically, if you have a company that is raising a Series B round, a Series C round, those companies are spending a lot of money on marketing. Again, typically. So I think in that case they were quite efficient with money, and this kind of wraps up the marketing part. So their entire journey here, how they grew. But one thing, just an observation that I would make is that Front was really, really efficient with money from the beginning, which is one of the reasons I feel strongly that Mathilde Collin is a great CEO. They were quite efficient with money. To illustrate that, I think when they first raised capital, when they first raised their seed round in Silicon Valley or 3.1, they still had like 12 or 18 months of runway of cash to deploy in 12 to 18 months, and they would become they would break even in, I don't know, 3 to 6 months, something like that. So they were approaching break even and had a lot of money in the bank, and then they raised $10 million. So that is very a very interesting scenario. I wonder. I've never spoken to any of her investors, and I have never spoken to her, so I don't know that. But I wonder how investors felt about that, because usually investors will maybe point out, like, you're not spending enough. You have a lot of money here. You're growing quite fast, which is great, but couldn't you grow even faster if you deployed, if you use that money? I wonder. I'd love to maybe talk to her one day, or some of her investors, to see if that was the case. Because from my experience, it would normally be the case that they would be kind of arguing about that, in a way, discussing that and seeing, like, couldn't you grow more? I mean, you still have, like, you raised $10 million and you still have $9 million in the bank after 6 9 months. Let's spend more money here and get more customers. So I wonder, but I don't know. Anyway, I hope you enjoyed this video. If you liked the content, please subscribe to the channel. Please give also your like to this video. It helps the channel grow, and helps more people see what I'm talking about. Hopefully it's interesting for more people as well. So yeah, subscribe to the channel, and I see you next time.